What is your name and where were you born?
My name is Ingwald Knudsen. I was born in Huntington, Long Island, New York.
What was life growing up as a kid?
Well, it was hard times when I was a kid. It was depression. But I was, young enough that it didn't bother me as much as some of the older guys. So I didn't have to graduate from school and then go right out on the street, like they did. But
Was it hard
it
living?
wasn't too bad. I mean, look back, I had a lot of fun, but I guess it wasn't fun at the time.
Yeah. What was it like living during the Depression?
What was it like?
Yeah. Like what was that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, for us, it wasn't too bad because people went on relief and the kids didn't like to be on welfare. Like now, everybody don't mind being on welfare. There it was people wanted to work, the men wanted to work, and there was no work. So a lot difference from there. For me, the only difference I had was I never had any allowance. If we worked, my sister and I, we gave it to my mom instead of her giving it back to us, But it wasn't bad.
Did any of your relatives or anyone in your family serve in the military?
My brother, one of my brothers, he was a commander.
How old?
He was in the Pacific. He's about 20 years older than me, but he was a commander on a troop ship.
How did you become involved in the military?
I just got old enough to join. There was a war on, so I quit school and joined the Navy.
How old were you?
17.
What made you decide that you wanted to join?
Everybody was doing it. I guess it was with like these other wars in World War II, all the kids just wanted to join. So it wasn't just to depend on what service you wanted to be in.
There a lot of like propaganda going around?
Well, yeah, I guess it was propaganda, but it was just the news covering the war. So the front pages was always pictures of the guys mostly in the Pacific. When the war first started out, we were getting kicked around. The Japanese were winning, but then so every time they got a chance to put something in that good for America was on the front page. That's propaganda, I guess, but not really. But the propaganda, I guess, was showing how vicious they were to us guys,
What branch in the military did you serve for?
The Navy.
How many years did you serve for?
Well, I served twice. I got recalled in the Korean War, so I guess basically I had 8 years before I got through. But I got discharged twice.
What was your job while serving?
I was an aviation metalsmith.
What did you make? Like when you were a metalsmith, did you make weapons? Did you?
No, we repaired airplanes, I went to aviation training school in Norman, Oklahoma, and then the planes were damaged or needed repairs. That's what we did. The metal part, not the machinist part.
What were the living quarters like?
Well, for guys in the air department, anything you do with the air department is not part of the base. It's attached to the base, so being in the air department was always better. Any place you went, you would go to like even on the carrier. I was on the carrier there at the end, and we were in the air department, which was attached to the ship. So you're not ship's company. The guys who run the ship had nothing to do with the guys who run the airplanes. So it was better duty to be in the air department.
What was the longest time you were out on sea for, like away from land?
I don't know, away from land, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Kept going from different islands back to Pearl Harbor. Not very long. I mean, out on the ship a long time, but you'd go into the port once in a while. Had to go in for supplies and stuff.
What was the food like?
I never had trouble with the food. I thought it was all right. I mean, some of the guys didn't like it, but I always thought it was all right. It was, after, whenever we left with, we had powdered stuff, after a while. That wasn't that great, but it didn't bother me, but, you have fresh milk and fresh eggs for a certain minute of time, then you go into powdered milk and powdered eggs. That's the only difference. But the food was good. for me anyhow.
Did you receive any awards while serving?
No,
No.
just rates. No, I mean, heroism medals and stuff like that. No.
What war were you part of, or what wars were you part of?
World War II.
World War II.
Yeah, the Pacific. I was in the Pacific the whole time.
Where did you travel while serving?
Oh, we traveled all over. There were only two battles we were in, was Iwo Jima and Okinawa, but we traveled to different islands and hauled, airplanes, picked up airplanes. We supplied, I was on a small carrier, we supplied the airplanes to the, when we never had pilots come back. We'd pick up the airplanes and load them on with crane and then catapult them off. The pilots would go and they would have assignments. If they'd taken the island already, they would land on the island. Otherwise, they replaced some of the planes on the big aircraft carriers, So we never got the pilots back. Once they catapulted them off, we took off and went and got more airplanes, more pilots.
What was your favorite place when you traveled?
I didn't have any.
No.
No.
Was serving in the military?
San Diego, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. Was serving in the military stressful for you?
Yeah, just, I don't know, we got up before dawn and went on general quarters, and but we were always on general quarters in case we got bombed, which we never did, but it was always stressful to sit, wait for dawn to come around, because if they were going to bomb us, it would be at dawn, but that's all. That nervous stomach, I guess you'd say, Nobody wasn't like, some of those guys in the foxholes, I guess, that's stressful.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't really remember. I look back, and you always look back and think of the funny things that happened. But when we were time, it was nothing funny. It seemed like,
Yeah. What did you do to deal with the stress you were feeling?
Well, I didn't. I didn't have that kind of stress. I mean, just nervous.
Yeah.
When you're sitting around waiting for something to happen, it didn't happen. It's okay. But but when they when they were getting in a really war zone, it was stressful. But you're looking at the other guys getting it.
Yeah.
I don't remember being all stressed out. No different than the rest of the guys. All just cracking wisecracks, I guess. Anyhow, I wasn't in like the Marines, those guys. I mean, it was total stress there.
What'd you and your fellow soldiers do to pass time?
Played pinochle mostly.
What's that?
We played pinochle, boy. We played a lot of pinochle. Even after I come home, we didn't have no job. We played pinochle.
What's pinochle?
It's a card game.
Oh, it's a card game?
You ever played pinochle?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. I played a lot of pinochle. And then I guys used to play AC-Doocy on there. I never played that, but just checkers,
Mm-hmm.
Not much. Then just played cards. We had time, They kept us busy.
Is the card something the Navy supplied for you guys?
No, somebody always had a deck of cards. I don't know. The Navy didn't. I never bought a deck of cards, but they always had cards. The guys did. We'd have 3 or 4 games going at the same time. But in the recreation, it's shooting the ball, stand and watch.
Mm-hmm. What was the scariest moment for you while you were serving?
I don't know, just when we were when they were in the war zone with the kamikazes, but they didn't get, they were blowing up. But we didn't stay in the zones very long. As soon as the planes got off, we went generally back to the Marshall Islands and picked up more airplanes and pilots. So being in when they're really going on is stressful.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, they just pick out a ship, the Japanese did. They just hit something. But they were generally going after the big ships.
How big was your ship? Like,
I was on a small carrier. You know, to tell you the truth, I don't even know how big it was anymore. It was a CBE, it was an escort carrier, it's called. And I think they made them first for the Pacific. I mean, for the Atlantic, they would go with the convoys, and then they had airplanes to protect the convoys before they had the small carriers. The convoys got creamed. But that was a different island, different ocean.
were you ever injured during your service?
No.
Did you ever get like really sick or anything like that?
I know nothing. I cut my knee once, but that was before I got on the ship even. I had some stitches in my knee, but that was, on land. It wasn't in the war. But I was never injured, no.
Did you ever have to deal with death?
No, not on my ship. I had some friends that got killed, but I wasn't there, I mean, it was, well, my hometown. I was in a small town. Almost everybody I knew joined the service, and some of the guys got killed, and some of them got wounded, but not me.
When were the most peaceful times for you when you were serving?
I don't know, when I wasn't on duty. I wasn't, I wasn't much to worry about going ashore. We go to a lot of places we went. I never got off the ship. I just hung around, but I had a good quarters, and I wasn't, I don't know, that's a hard question.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like 60 years ago, or 65 years, that's a long time ago. And I don't remember a lot of how I felt. I know I just, a buddy, we lived in the metal shop, just the two of us, so we had pretty good, back there, everybody hung out there, But it was not much to do except push airplanes around.
Are you still friends with the man who worked with you in the metal shop?
No, I haven't seen any of those guys. I saw one guy that was on the ship with me when I got recalled. In the Korean War, I got recalled. I went down to San Diego, and I was walking on the barracks, and I yelled at him. He was a guy who was on my ship. I hadn't seen him in 5 years, and he was recalled, and he was already assigned to another carrier. But I didn't get. That's the only guy I ever saw that I was in the service with, that was on my ship. That actually was a shipmate, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I never saw any of them.
What did you miss most while you were away?
I guess miss being home, hanging out with my buddies, but it was just mostly want to get out of the Navy and go home. That's missed home, I suppose you say that.
How'd you stay in touch with your family? Did you write letters and?
Oh yeah, I wrote letters. It's correspondence, that's all. If I got, when I was on land base, I'd call home. But the phones were really tied up. It was really hard to get a phone call through. You had to wait a while, It just seemed like everybody was on the phone during the war. You really had to wait to get a phone call through.
Did they give like each person like a phone card and like a certain amount of minutes and stuff?
You had to put money in the phone, but you can call off the base. There's a payphone. It's the only way you call home.
Was it hard for some people to be able to pay for their phone calls? Like,
phone call, local call was a nickel. Nickel call. Now what is it? It costs you about 75 cents a dollar. I don't know what a payphone costs now, but it was a nickel. But long distance was, you had to just have a handful of change so you could stick it in there, But it was just hard to get through. The phones were so tied up because of the war, I guess. But you couldn't just go and put a phone and call for your home. You'd have to wait, and you'd sit outside, in a PX or somewhere and wait, and they'd call back, and your phone call was finally put through. But sometimes it wouldn't go through. If you didn't have a lot of time, there was no sense even trying to call. You couldn't get through. It just seemed like the trains everything was full. Trains were all full, buses were all full. I don't know where everybody was going, but you could always travel, but you couldn't you couldn't pick up a phone and call home. It wouldn't happen.
When you enlisted, did your parents support you, or are they more against it, or?
Well, my dad, it was just my mother and my sister, like my family at the time. My brothers were grown up and married. But No, I think my mother never objected. I just told her I was going to join. And there was no, I had one brother already in, but he was married and had kids of his own. That wasn't, I just expected it, The thing is, if the guys weren't joining, they were getting drafted. You're going to go one way or the other. At that time during World War II, everybody was, involved. And it was a different kind of attitude. You guys wanted to go.
So you figured if you're going to get drafted anyways, you might as well just enlist yourself?
Yeah, well, the guys that got drafted, they waited till they probably 19 or 20, you could hang out, but if you got drafted, you went where they put you. If you joined, you could join the Navy. They didn't draft you in the Navy. You joined the Marines, they didn't draft you into the Marines. But if they drafted you, you went in the Army. I don't think anybody got drafted and then got in the Navy. So if you wanted to get a part of service, you had to go ask for it, But it just everybody, when the war broke out, just about the whole senior class joined the Marine Corps, it seemed like, when I was 15 when the war broke out, but I just thought it'd be over way before I ever had to go in. It wasn't not right over right away. It took a while.
How'd you feel about the support you're getting from back home?
It was great support. Oh, you couldn't even walk out in the street, somebody offered you a ride, get home for dinner. It was really pretty neat. The Korean War was different. So I'd hitchhike might take an hour to get a ride, no matter where you Levi's. The Korean War was completely different. Vietnam was worse yet, but World War II, the whole United States was behind it. It was not a problem. I know you just walk out and you didn't even look for a ride. The guy said, "You want a ride, fella?" And take a ride. But it was complete support.
Was it hard to transition back to normal life when you came back to the States?
No, just wasn't much going on. There was no work, and just my hometown is just all the guys just stand around the corner and talk about what they did. It was good to be home. That's all. But the guys were getting discharged out, and you had points. Had a point system. If you had so much combat time, so much, time in, you got a number. And then, my ship, I knew when I was getting out, they posted it every day. And we counted our points up, and I had, just all the guys would just watch the bulletin board. Today's my day, I should have enough points, and they post your name, and then they discharge you.
Did you work when you got back home, or?
Well, there wasn't too much work. I had a couple of buddies that were contractors, and what they did was they gave you 52 weeks, they give you $20 a week for 52 weeks, they call it 52-20 club. And you could live on 20 barely, but that got you, it was like unemployment, but it was service. And you supposedly better get a job in 52 weeks, because that run out then, you know what I mean? But so most of all the guys signed up for that, and then you just once a week you go up. But I did part-time work. It wasn't a lot of work. It's just all those guys coming home,
Yeah.
And there was no military spending now. Right off the bat, they closed them down. Robin was making airplanes. I started making canoes. And the guys that worked in government all that time, they laid off a ton of guys. They were laying off. They weren't hiring, because there was no more spending. It was tougher. It was tougher for me after the war than before the war, because I was just a kid. That's why I say the guys that graduated during the Depression, it was hard times for them. They come out of high school, now they got no job. We should have stayed in high school, Anyhow, it worked out.
When you went back home, did you miss being in the Navy?
I never missed being in the Navy. I didn't really want to go in when they called me in a second time. I didn't have the spirit for it, but just a year.
What was the best part about being in the Navy?
I don't think there was a best part. There was, yeah, I had some good buddies, you know. The worst thing is, you know, I was only, 17, I'd never been nowhere. Now all of a sudden I'm never going home, you know, I mean, you get home and, so most of the thing, you're homesick, you just want to go home, you know. It's good to get out. It wasn't any best part, I don't think, not for me. It's just I had good duty because I was in the air department, you know. But always away from home, that's the worst part.
What advice would you give someone who's considering to join today?
Well, yeah, I don't know. You gotta, if you're thinking about just doing it, you can join the service and make a career out of it or get a good education out of it, you know. You learn it some kind of a good trade. But you gotta realize you ain't going home for a long time a lot, you know, if you're just kind of a hangout kind of guy anyhow. I don't know, I wouldn't join if I was a young guy now. So, I don't like the regimentation of, you being told to do everything all the time, you know. But you can work at it, and, I mean, you survive. I didn't be mad all the time. I just wished that the war would get over and we go home, you know, and so did just most everybody. Because some of the guys, when I got recalled during the Korean War, my crew chief wasn't doing good in civilian life, and he decided to stay. And I thought, well, that's him, that's not me, you know. He said, I'm re-upping, and he stayed. And I suppose he retired, you know. I had 8 years in by that time, and I could have did 12 more, but I was only 25, and, I'm not 26. But anyhow, I thought, 12 years is a long time when you're in your 20s. It's a short time now for me. 12 years go by like it's a shot. But anyhow, a lot of guys like the service, you know. It wasn't my favorite thing.
So not only were you part of war, but you're part of a lot of historical events. So what was something like Pearl Harbor like?
Well, Pearl Harbor was, like I say, they bombed Pearl Harbor. I was only 15. I was sleigh riding that time. I mean, my buddies, came home and we were at war, but pretty bad for the guys over there, you know what I mean? You see it enough on TV, boy.
Yeah.
But I was there a couple of years later.
So you weren't enlisted when Pearl Harbor happened. You were still a kid.
Well, I had a friend that was the guy I hung out with. When I was in the Navy, and he was in Bermuda when they bombed Pearl Harbor, but he was in Pearl Harbor about 20 days later, and it was all blown up when he was there. He was telling me about it, but you could see it on TV how bad it was. But like I say, I was 2 more years before I went back in the service. So I could say I was in Pearl Harbor, but that was 2 years after they bombed it. It was still, you could still see the wrecks there. They were still there. They hadn't cleared them out yet. Arizona was still sticking out of the, out of the water. They hadn't made a monument out of it yet. But it was bad for the guys, you know what I mean? But it just said the fact that you didn't know what was going to happen. After that, you're out there, it's happening all the time. So different. Same bombs. Just, these guys will all mind their own business, all of a sudden they're blowing them up, you know? Did you watch the film on it?
Yeah, I've watched,
Yeah.
I've seen Pearl Harbor.
Pretty bad. Oh, I know a couple of guys were there, but, they were older. I know, when I was up in Magoo, I actually, this guy from Montana, I hung out with him a bit. He was in Pearl Harbor when they were bombing it. He was a fireman. He said just all chaos. They didn't know what the hell was going on, you know what I mean? But he's not the only one I know that ever was there.
Was it pretty chaotic back home too when people found out about what happened?
I think I wasn't in California. It was California that went nuts there. They started patrolling the coast and arresting all the Japanese. And in my hometown, the Japanese kid, they made him class president. They didn't persecute the Japanese in the East Coast like they did in the West Coast. And there was more Japanese in California anyhow, you know. Because all his farmers had Japanese around here. But so they put the blackout, you know, they had the blackout. And then they started the restriction and rationing and gas and everything. But they didn't. California was nervous, you know, about the Japanese landing and taking over California. It was really, and then they shelled it up there, the oil rig up there, and I think the Japanese submarine shelled Santa Barbara, fired a few shots up there, and that panicked them out again there, you know. And then, you know, it was just, it got to be, they rationed everything, and it got to be hard on the people that didn't go to war. Everything went to war. You couldn't buy tires, they got gas ration, they got food ration, and it was, you know, so that they did suffer, the civilians suffered from World War II, not the Korean War. They had plenty of everything. But they, I know, you got a car, you got 4 gallons of gas a week. That's all you got. You got a little sticker, a little stamp, and you give them the stamp and give you 4 gallons. That's only this week. Next week you get 4 gallons again. But my town, my small town, we used to walk everywhere anyhow, you know, but it's still 4 gallons, not very much gas.
Yeah.
And they had no butter, no meat was rationed. And it was, I did better. I ate better in the service than the guys if I stayed home, you know. Anyway, plenty of chickens, but beef was, you didn't get too much beef. And all dairy products was eggs, plenty of eggs. Plenty of chickens and plenty of eggs, but not beef. That's all.
You said you had sisters in your family?
One sister, yeah.
During World War II.
She worked at Grumman. She was working like the Rosie the Riveter, yeah.
Yeah.
She was working building airplanes. But it was all the girls. I mean, there's a lot of guys working at Grumman, but had an awful lot of women doing. That's when women started doing men's work, you know.
Can you see the appreciation for what women did sway when people came back from serving?
Well, you know, when I got out, I wasn't. I was just about like when I went in. I wasn't interested in current events, and you know, I didn't have TV. If you want to see the news, you had to go to movies. They give you 15 minutes of the news. Otherwise, you listen to it on the radio. And my mom used to listen to it, but I never listened to the news, and I didn't think anything about, you know, appreciation or anything else. We just all come home. It just went back to normal pretty much, except I was older. It was really, when you look at it, sometimes I look at it like the years I was in the service were the hardest years for you at that age. You get out of school, and now what do? Well, I went back to school when I got out. I went back to night school because a lot of the veteran guys quit and joined the service. And so we had a special night class for veterans to get your high school education. I mean, get your diploma. They made it pretty easy for you. You know, I got tons of credit for it because I went to 2 training schools while I was in the Navy, and I got credit for all that. I had enough credit to graduate, but you still have to take English and history in New York. It's a state regents. Everybody takes the test at the same time. At 9 o'clock, you tear it open, you start. The whole state is starting at 9 o'clock. They're taking the same test, and you have to pass that regents, they call it, in English and in history, and then you graduate. But I had, like I said, I had 5 months in Oklahoma where 8 hours a day school for aviation, you know, metalsmith training. And that's enough credit to graduate from high school, but I still didn't have the English and the history, so you just had one college, Hofstra College, they had night school 3 nights a week. And that's, me and 5 of my buddies, we'd all ride together, but there was all veterans, that's all. Just guys that quit school, got back in got your diploma? Nobody's ever asked for it since I had it, but somewhere around. It wasn't as important as it is now, you know. You can't get nothing without a high school education. But anyhow, I don't, you know, I just went back to, as far as I was concerned, I just went back to normal when I got out. I wasn't stressed, I didn't have a, you know, post-traumatic thing, but I had a couple of buddies who were really in Marine Corps combat, and one of them, I just think about it now, I never seen him even stressed out. And he was never wounded, but I had another buddy who was wounded pretty bad, and he was just the same. It just seemed like, you know, I don't know what was going on in their mind, but one of the guys, he was in the Marine Corps, he was wounded and discharged before I went in, and we used to play softball every night after work. And we played softball, Bob would play. He was, you know, wounded to send home. He didn't have to go back. He had his hand was messed up, and he'd take a baseball bat and he'd have to close his hand on the bat. You remember, we played softball every night. He couldn't open his hand, so you didn't stand over there, because if he hit the ball, he threw the bat, it would open his hand. And I said, don't stand around there, you get hit with the bat. But the last I heard, he was the district attorney in my hometown. But I don't know. I just, you know, the way it is now, they got so many stressed out guys, just like, you know, 2 weeks of war in Desert Storm, and the guys are in psychiatry, you know. But some of these guys were really in the war, you know. And when the war was over, they took all the planes off my ship, and they put cots on the ship, and they called it the magic carpet. It was every veteran, mostly Marines, combat guys, had been really in it for a long time. Some of them were in almost 2 years of combat, and they brought them home right away as quick as they could. And so we had all these cots on the hangar deck, and all these Marines come on, and them guys were, if anybody was stressed, they should have been stressed. I don't know how they were, but I used to watch them. They just played poker all the way over for 5 days, 6 days, and never saw them again. But, you know, I'm talking about, you know, when you see a guy's in the war a little bit, like I'm not taking away from the desert guys, but I mean, they weren't in the war.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were shooting at them. That's as bad as it gets. But just think about those guys that never got to come home. I just from one island to the other. My buddy Furman, he did 4 amphibian landing, and, you know, and he joined when he joined the Marines when he was 15, and they called him up when he was 16, because he was supposed to be 18, and he was in 4 Tinian, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, and never got wounded. That's like hitting a lottery. Yeah. Because almost every Marine that was in combat that I knew got wounded or killed. And anyhow, we went down. You had to go join the draft as soon as you got out. You had to go sign up for the draft. And he just turned old enough to be drafted, and he'd been out. He was in the war for 2 years, you know. Anyhow, so that's about the stress. Like I say, we come home, it just seemed like it was just home again.
It's good.
I wasn't in that kind of combat like he was, you know, or like any of the Marine guys were. A lot of the Marines, the older guys, they were home already, you know, wounded and didn't have to go back. But I had one buddy that was wounded pretty bad in Tarawa, and he went back and he was on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Wow. So they kept putting him back in war, you know what I mean? So.
Are you a part of any veteran groups today?
No, I drink at the VFW, but I never joined nothing. I'm not much of a joiner. Boy Scouts the only thing I ever joined. I mean, it's a fact. Yeah. I don't, I used to go to the American Legion too. It's just, you know, the guys that join are pretty much involved, you know, because they do things that executives and all that stuff. And I just, I never joined in my hometown. They didn't have VFW before the war that they had it. There must have been one, but there wasn't one of my own. There was American Legion. I used to always go down to American Legion, but some of the guys thought I belonged, but I didn't belong. I just went down and drink a beer, play some pool. Probably should have joined, but it's just, you join, you just support them.
Mm-hmm.
But I figured, buy enough beer, I supported them.
True.
But I drink over here at the VFW right here in Granada Hills. And they used to pressure you to join, but they don't anymore. I didn't used to like to go in there because every time the guys said, why don't you join? When are you going to join? I didn't want to join, I just wanted to have a beer, so I quit going in there. But now it's a different bunch. It's just a bunch of old guys who nobody cares if you belong or not. It's a long time ago war.
Yeah.
It's been 60 years. That's a long time. Lucky I can remember. Yeah.
Do you think society now underappreciates what you and your friends and what the military did for our country?
When they had the Veterans Day last month, right? Or this month, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
November. Yeah. But anyhow, a lot of guys came into VFW that bought rounds for guys. I appreciate the guys. I don't know who they are, but I mean, somebody does.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody appreciates it. I've had a lot over the years, guys saying, thanks a lot, you guys. But just, if you were there, you would have been in. I mean, if you were 17 and the war broke out like then, you'd have been in. And they wouldn't have had to call you in, you'd be gone. One of the things is you really think about, myself, I used to think about, of the uniform and the ribbons and getting the girls, I mean, really, get those ribbons and you got some girls you get to get home, but some of the guys had the most ribbons never got to come home, so they didn't, it was already, war was over by the time they come home. Unless you really got wounded real bad, you stayed up there. They kept you there. So, but anyhow, it's a different altogether, different era. I think the guys did better in the service from the Depression because they were living a kind of a hard time. And for me, going in the Navy, it's the first time I ever had any of my own money.
Mm-hmm.
I never had money. Whatever I made, I'd give to my mom, because my dad was dead, and we're just the three of us, me and my mom and my sister. We worked and helped. We all kept going. Never went on welfare. That was what you didn't want to do, especially if you're a kid.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. It's still embarrassing. Give them a big bunch of food and bring it over to your house. But the people don't mind anymore. They don't mind going down and getting money. If you taken, they call it relief when I was a kid. But people didn't want relief. They wanted a job. You got food stamps, you got coal stamps, you got stamps for everything, and then they were embarrassed to have it. Now people drive their big Cadillac up and get their food stamps, and it doesn't bother them. It's different.
Do you still have your naval uniform?
No.
No.
I don't even have a peacoat. I don't know what I did. I sure like to have a peacoat. I like the peacoat.